Hi everyone, and welcome to this evening's webinar. As Charlie mentioned, I'm Flo, Curlew Action's General Manager, and I'll be chairing tonight. We have 14 presentations tonight, so I'm going to get started immediately. We'll try to finish at around 8 p.m, but if required, I will allow us to run over slightly as there are so many interesting things to hear about tonight, so I won't be cutting us off exactly 8 on the dot if we still have a few minutes to go. We have a very packed schedule, so as Charlie said, we won't have time to do a Q&A this evening. But if anyone has any questions, then yeah, again, as Charlie said, you can put them in the chat and email us afterwards if you'd like to. And we'll try and get in contact with the speaker if you'd like to know an answer to a specific question. So tonight we'll be covering the breeding season for curlews around Europe, hearing from a collection of projects about how this season has gone. We had our UK breeding season roundup last month, and this can now be watched on our YouTube channel, so feel free to go and have a look at that. Some presentations this evening will be given live. We have a couple of recordings, and I'll also be reading a few of the presentations that we've had sent over to us this evening. But I'm going to get right into it. We have our first speaker of the evening, Donal Began, who is the Head Starting and Nest Protection Manager for the Breeding Waders European Innovation Partnership, or EIP, in Ireland. Donal sent a recording, so we will start with a video this evening, if you're able to share that, Charlie.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Donal Began, and I work for the Breeding Waders EIP, where I manage the head starting and nest protection elements of the project. Just a word of thanks to Mary, Flo and Co at the Curlew Action team for organising this event and inviting us in the Breeding Waders EIP to present our Curlew results for 2025. For anyone that's not familiar with the situation of breeding Curlew in Ireland, we've undergone a 98% decline in the breeding population since the 1980s, and we're now looking at less than 100 breeding pairs fragmented across the Republic of Ireland, and they're confined to blanket bogs, grasslands, silage fields and some of our islands on our inland lakes. I'm going to run through some of our data from 2025 using our GIS dashboard. And this is filtered to select one of the 10 species that we work with, so Eurasian Curlew, and the date range is from the 1st of April to the end of July. So the number of survey areas was 241, and that's standard surveys where we're carrying out Brown and Shepherd or O'Brien Smith, and we're also applying ad hoc observations from field staff, from nest protection officers on top of this as well. So the number of sightings of Eurasian Curlew within the country during that period was 524. Now the filter isn't turned off to remove non-breeding behaviour, so some of those records are of Curlew that are displaying non-breeding behaviour, so that has to be still filtered out. So as we'll see, the population is really fragmented in Ireland. In 2025, we were able to locate 14 Curlew nests in the areas outlined on the map, and 6 of those nests that were in high-risk areas, so areas that are more at risk to predation or destruction of nests or chicks, were taken for head starting as an emergency measure to help bolster our Curlew population. The remaining nests were assisted where possible with nest protection fencing and targeted predation risk management. So 12 of those nests were actually located by our nest protection officers that are administering our site-specific targeted predation risk management, and 2 of them were located using thermal imaging drone. It's worth noting that this year was particularly challenging to locate nests with thermal imaging drone due to really hot weather spell during the survey period. Our predation risk management is administered via our site-specific nest protection plans, and each of those plans is based on a 1 kilometre buffer of a known Curlew territory, known Curlew nest from previous years, and it begins in early February with the employment of 26 seasonal nest protection officers that focus primarily on fox and mink during that February period and into mid-March, and then they are supplemented with further nest protection officers from March to July to concentrate on corvids, to concentrate on nest finding, to concentrate on erecting nest protection fences, translocation of non-target species that we have obtained licenses for, and diversionary field tactics. This is an overview or a heat map of activity from our nest protection officers around the country in the 2025 season. And look, this heat map is in direct correlation with waders sightings and waders nests, and this is not specific to curlew, so it's applicable to all 10 waders species that we work with. So after all the GIS and fancy dashboards and shapefiles, it ultimately comes down to the following numbers, and that's the number of pairs, which is 58, the number of fledglings per pair, which is 0.313, which is significantly lower than what is required for a stable breeding population. However, there were some gains, especially in areas where the most intense predation risk management was deployed. Over the winter time, we will be looking further into those areas in more detail and assess the productivity on a site-by-site basis. It's also worth noting that head starting productivity was 2.5 fledglings per pair for 2025, and we're hopeful that that emergency response measure will hold on to and bolster our population whilst we implement a broader suite of conservation measures. So look, that's me finished, everyone. Thank you very much. Gur míle maith agad agus slán.
Fab, thank you, Donal. Nice to see that head starting is having some success as well. I've been over there myself and seen the facilities, and it's amazing what's going on there, so thanks very much. Moving on now eastwards to Spain, we are going to hear a presentation sent in by Professor Jesus Dominguez, who works in the zoology department of the University of Santiago de Compostela in Spain. I'll be reading out the presentation on his behalf, so if you're happy to share the slides, Charlie, I will have a look. So the Spanish curlew population is the most southerly in the Western Palearctic and is located in the Tercha district. Apologies for potential pronunciation issues there. But the nearest breeding population is in southern France, and I think this means the nearest breeding area to this one, we'll see in a minute just how small this one actually is, which is located in a small airfield. Quite typical of this sort of place, curlews do tend to like airfields. They can do well there, as we know from around Europe. And this site is owned by the Spanish Ministry of Defence and is characterised by temperate oceanic scrubland. So some shocking figures that I actually wasn't aware of until I saw these slides myself. Spain only has one pair of curlews. They had 5 just 11 years ago, so still not high numbers, but only getting worse, unfortunately. And this was found to be a result of adult predation in the breeding area. 2 of this one's remaining nests were head started and one of them was released, but the other 2 eggs failed to hatch. And this is a problem that is seen around projects in Europe. Eggs these days, a lot of them just not hatching, and it's something that's being looked into. So head starting was tried in 2021, or started in 2021, sorry, as a result of the dire situation with curlews in Spain. 19 eggs and 6 chicks have been collected from nests to be head started over the years. Of these, only 6 have eventually been released back into the wild, however. Like Ireland, when it comes to head starting, they have the facilities to head start many eggs to hopefully head start the population back to larger numbers. A genetic study published in 2019 did find that there are no differences between the Spanish population and other European populations, so there's no reason why this wouldn't be possible. And it's important to note that the project is for collaborators, so if anyone thinks this sounds relevant to them and is interested in getting in touch, then feel free to send me or the admin inbox an email after this evening, and we can try and put you in touch. So yeah, some very sad news from Spain. They're in dire need of some more curlews immediately. But I'll move on with that onto the next presentation. We'll be hearing from Jeanne Bienvenut, who is an ornithologist at the organisation Groupe Ornithologique des Halles, where she has been working for 3 years on the conservation of lowland birds and coordinates a regional project on curlews. So I will let her get started with her presentation. Thanks very much.
Yes, I'm Jeanne Bienvenue, and I'm working at the organization Groupe Ornithologique des Deux-Sèvres in France. And I will first present you the results of the LIMAT survey, which is an estimate of the French breeding population of 45 species of Anatidae, waders, grape, and coots. And we will, of course, focus on the Eurasian curlew. So in 2021 and 2022, we have 830 to 1,142 pairs of curlews, which represents a decrease of 30% compared to 2010 and 2011, and a decrease of 40% compared to 1995, when the population was around 1,966 breeding pairs. And if we focus on some territories in France, we can see that the Val de Saône, in the east part of France, where the green is darker, it's the biggest population in France. It represents 40% of the French breeding population, and in 2022 they had around 400 pairs, which represent the half of the population. They were in 1995. But it's the opposite in Normandy, because they have an increase of the number of pairs. There were 100 in 2010, but now it's between 155 to 210 pairs. And more dramatically, we have the northeast population and the one in Brittany, because in 2022 in the northeast they had around 56 to 80 pairs compared to 350 pairs in the 1995, and in Brittany they have around 12 pairs compared to 300 in the 60s. So it's a really big decline, and the main pressure are the habitat loss, the agricultural intensification, and predation. Next slide, please. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. And so for the breeding season of 2025, we can see that we had in total 622 breeding pairs, and it produced 42 youngs that fledged minimum, but it represents 0.07 young per pair, which is very low. And so in Normandy, we had around 30 youngs that fledged, which is the biggest number we had in France. And in the Val de Saône, so the biggest population, they had 0 youngs that fledged, so they were pretty sad. It was a bad season for the Curlews there. And in the other part of France, we have from 1 to 4 youngs that fledge, but it's quite low everywhere. But we can notice that 90% of the curlew nest on Natura 2000 areas, which are protected area, and most of them nest on meadow, but there are some nesting on moorlands. And we do protect nests in some territories, but we still have a low productivity, and the population are in decline all over the France, actually. And so for the last slide, I just wanted to share you that this year we are doing a special meeting with the national network. and we will do conferences and sharing experiences about curlew conservation. And so this year we will meet in person, not via conferences. So we hope that will be a great opportunity to gather people as you do with Curlew Action. And so we hope that it will gather a lot of people in France and have a good dynamic to better conserve the curlews. Thank you for your attention.
Great, thank you very much for that. Always good to hear people being brought together to work on finding the solutions to these problems, which are obviously very large problems to be solving. So it's great to hear that you're involved in all that sort of thing as well. Moving along to the Netherlands now, we're going to hear next from Henk Jan Ottens. Henk Jan Ottens. We were just talking in the breakout room about how I wouldn't do that, and then I did. Henk Jan is a field worker for Montagu's Harrier Foundation and will be presenting live about the 2025 curlew season in the Netherlands. So over to Henk Jan.
Yes, these are the results from the Netherlands. It looks like the sound contest. Yeah, the first picture I show is typically a breeding area, so as we know in the Netherlands, in Drenthe, namely a huge potato field and tram lines from a tractor for spraying, and at the edge of that tram line a nest with 4 eggs. So we see this often, and it is very difficult to find these nests, except when you walk through these tram lines and you have a little luck. I have 5 slides, and I try to get it in, to put it down in 5 minutes. How do I get to the next? Yes. I have a picture of Drenthe in the north of the Netherlands, and I put it in the center of a huge area, as you see. What we do in Drenthe is different things. We fence our nests, and this year we had a new record, almost 80 nests we could fence. We look after chick survival by tagging the chicks already in the nest just after born with radio transmitters. We look after causes of failure. We look for habitat use by these tagged chicks, and this year we first had our experience with GPS loggers on chicks. I will present that later. We collect all the stuff for our population study. We look after what do curlews need in our environment and what type of habitat improvement is needed. And we look after food by collecting poop samples of the chicks, and also we investigate insects in different types of habitat. Our yearly budget is 82,000 euros, and that is most brought together by BirdLife in the Netherlands, funding. There are always people who want to help us, and the local government of the province of Drenthe does help us also, does support our work. So now some results. We found 105 nests, and we fenced 76 nests. 87% of all the fenced nests hatched successfully, and that are these numbers we have mostly all years. So that's very high outcome success, hatching success. And fledged chicks, we had 35 to 41 chicks fledged this year, and that is for us, no, how do I get it? Well, that is the best year ever for us. And we were very glad with that. So we hardly didn't understand what was going on. We had different of several pairs with 3 to 4 chicks. So we never had that before. The GPS logger data, we sampled, we had 5 chicks with a logger, and I show here 2 maps with the data of these chicks. We collected in several days. They had this GPS logger, and with the red stars you see the nest place, and the yellow dots are the dots today over by day, and the black whitish dots are dots at night. Yeah, I get a chat. I will react later. And you see, in fact, you see 2 different, yeah, the dots are different spread out. The most left map is in an area with a lot of arable land, and these chicks, this pair found a grassland where they stayed on for a long time. You see that at night most points are together, so we think that in night there will not be they don't forest, but maybe they get warmed up by the parents or hide them on at the same place. The mean home range was 17.6 hectares. At the maximum, we found 35, almost 36 home range of 36 hectare, and that is what you have needed to, in fact, to will you get to habitat improvement, you need these areas to fix it. And as what I said is at night, the chicks are less mobile. Our chicks, which fledge, they get a flag, so we know them when they are seen at the Atlantic coast all over the place. And this recoveries we reported already. Out of 30 flagged chicks, of 19 flagged chicks, we have now 30 chicks recorded. And you see the curlews in the map. These are the places where they have been seen. And this is just the chicks who are in their wintering areas. Most get strictly west to the UK or Ireland. Some birds are more southwest. And this year we had our first curlew wintering in Spain. So that was a new recording for us. And the bird you see on the picture, this is a picture from Tommy Evans from Wales, and he made this picture in southwest Wales. And in the field he didn't know this chick was flagged, but after he saw the picture he thought, well, this is a flagged bird, so I could give him the information about this bird. So this is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Nice to hear the high hatching success you had this year and the fact that it's been a record year. We're now going to move over to Paul Shimmings in Norway. Paul works for BirdLife Norway as a senior consultant and has sent us slides about this year's curlew breeding season in Norway, of course. So thanks, Paul, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. This presentation is it really is an update of the slides which I presented last year with a few bits of new information thrown in. Could we have the next slide, please? Next slide, Charlie, if it's possible. Or is it stuck? There we go. Yeah, okay, so we started annual monitoring in 2019 when we chose the Eurasian Curlew as the bird of the year. No, we have a bird of the year every year, which we focus on, and the monitoring has become a spin-off from that project. So we've now got several years of data. We have a standardized count methodology where we count the same areas each spring, though there are some areas with some modifications to the standard methodology. Basically, one stops at a count point for 5 minutes and note however many curlews you see or hear, and also the sex and behavioural activities, whether they're territorial or not, whether they're on a nest. And then you move on to the next point after you've been there for 5 minutes. We also note down other wader species at the same time, just to get a complete picture of what else is breeding in the same areas. There are 5 areas where we count annually, which are Porsanger, Harøy, Vega, Frøya, and Nordhordland. In addition, we have Lofoten, which is counted every 3rd year. For the 5 main sites, we count with 5-minute timed intervals at each point, but at Lofoten it's a slightly different methodology where we just drive around in a car and stop at the same spots as we did 3 years ago, and just note down what we see. One modification to the methodology is that in Porsanger in the far north, the population is so small that we're really struggling to find the birds, and they're not calling. They don't seem to be displaying. They don't seem to be territorial. So we have to spend a lot longer time to pick up on the birds that are present there. And we also have data from other projects down a place called Lista in the very south. We have good records from there, and also around Oslo, the farmland around Oslo and the outskirts of the main city, and as well as near Stavanger, but that's part of other projects. Next slide, please, Charlie. Here's just an example map showing the island of Vega, where we have 45 count points. That's actually the one area where we have the most count points. And there's good reason for that, as we'll see in a slide in a minute. But this is just to show you how the count points are spread out across the island. And it's nice, comfortable field work as long as you get nice weather. It needs to be nice weather to look for curlews, and you just sit in the car and stop for 5 minutes and count curlews, and maybe have a quick cup of tea whilst you're counting them, and then move on to the next site. So there's all these monitoring areas have a good road network, so it's easy to access the count points. Next slide, please. And here's a rather nasty-looking psychedelic figure, which shows some of the results from the 5 main monitoring sites plus Lofoten. So you see in Porsanger on the left, the colours are the different years. You can Porsanger on the left, the numbers are sort of fluctuating around 10 pairs, maybe slightly under that, but 10 pairs at the most. In Lofoten, 22 pairs in 2021 and 70 pairs in 2024. But as we're not monitoring there every year, we can't see if there's any real changes. In Harøy, sort of up and down a bit, but we had a good year in 2022 with 34 pairs. Vega's rather interesting because this year was a bumpy year. There were more displaying curlews than I can remember. It's one of the sites that I count myself. It's not any of my colleagues to do it. So 72 pairs this year, which is the best ever, and that's just 72 pairs at the 45 count points that we have in Vega, they're probably there are more pairs on the island in total. In Froya, sort of up and down a bit around the 30-35 mark in general, and Nordhordland, that's where the one area where we start to see a decline in numbers from between 10 and 18 pairs down to 7 or 8 pairs the last 2 seasons. That's one of the sites in the south where we're seeing a real decline. Next slide, please. Yeah, so how many curlews do we think we have in Norway? Well, in 1994 we published the breeding bird atlas for Norway. We reckon there were 5,000 to 10,000 breeding pairs. In 2004, BirdLife International estimated 5,000 to 10,000 pairs again. Now that may just be from information from the atlas in 1994. These are very vague counts. There was in 2015, myself and a colleague, we looked closer at data and trends and what we could find out about distribution of curlew in Norway, and we arrived at a figure of between 2,000 to 3,000 breeding pairs. Today, 10 years after we published our estimate in 2015, we don't know how many pairs we have, but they're probably less than they were 10 years ago. Next slide, please. Here we can see data from the breeding bird survey, where there are between 400 and 500 count routes in Norway, where we count all breeding birds using standard methodology, and yeah, numbers are sort of fluctuating a bit, but there's a tendency to decline there as well. If we look back in time, then there's been at least a 50% reduction in the population in the period 1996 to 2012. And we think the population decline may have been as high as 70% or more from the mid-90s to today. And small populations in the south are more or less extinct. The situation is better in central and northern regions, but in some parts of southern Norway, you don't hear curlews at all anymore, so they've disappeared. Next,
I'm going to have to give
please.
you about one more minute, Paul, just so you know.
I've got one more slide, so we'll make that.
Okay, perfect.
There's two
Thanks.
more slides.
Thank you.
Just to go back to Vega, which is a place where I showed earlier, where the population is really good this year with 72 pairs. We reckon that in total there's 72 pairs at the count points, but we reckon there may be a lot more, and I think there may be as many as 100 pairs there. That might be a realistic estimate, so that's a good sign, but it's not representative of the rest of the country. Next slide, please. We're nearly there. Yeah, the threats and drivers, I think we all know about. One thing that ought to be included here is climate change, because climate change, with a warming climate, then the farmers are cutting silage earlier, and this curlew here was sitting in the silage field that had just lost its chicks to the machine, so that was really sad. And finally, the final slide, which as you can see, this curlew has just about disappeared from view, and we just hope that we can do whatever we can to prevent this happening, both nationally, locally, and globally. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Paul. The pattern again seems quite similar in Norway to many other countries. The population is struggling but experiencing some strongholds as well. So now we're going to be moving on to Switzerland. I'll be talking over the slides that were sent in by Claudia Müller, who works with the Swiss Ornithological Institute. So this presentation is about the current situation of the Eurasian curlew in Switzerland this year, 2025. The number of breeding pairs in Switzerland dropped from about 6 or 7 in the early 80s to now none as of 2006, unfortunately. The final pairs held on in large open wetland areas, but are now no more in Switzerland. They seem to have been very up and down in the 80s, and it would be interesting to know the cause of that. And as is to be expected, their distribution obviously shrunk as well over that time. Here, this can be seen several decades earlier than in the graph on the last slide, with them eventually just clinging on in the northeast. Then in 2013 to 2016, you can see on the bigger map, nothing going on there after what we've seen in previous years. But Curlew are actually quite high in number out with the breeding season, certainly compared to the numbers in the breeding season anyway, the non-existent nesters that they have nowadays. Numbers can reach as high as nearly 1,800 in winter, and a small number seem to persist all throughout the year, although, as I say, not nesting. I do wonder if that means that a few could eventually recolonize. I'm not sure if that's something that's expected to happen or likely to be happening. Outside of the breeding season, curlews are now seen in 4 main areas in Switzerland, again favouring open wetland areas near several lakes, as you can see down the right-hand side. I originally was going to read the names out, but I thought I'd let you read the names so that rather than me mispronouncing them, you could just see what they were called. I think the latter two especially, I was slightly worried I might not be able to say them properly, so you can just see them there on the screen. So again, curlews are certainly using Switzerland still, although at a low number, with different feeding and roosting habitats being used, kind of similar to what you'd expect elsewhere. So in fact, their presence from autumn or late summer to spring, essentially out with the breeding season, is increasing. There are various possible reasons for this, but they may suggest a wintering distribution change or possibly improved productivity elsewhere. Likely change in distribution, especially with the climate change and things like that, may be changing where they're wintering. Wintering numbers in Switzerland, increasing, kind of the same with the distribution, but I think that's pretty much it. So thanks, Charlie. That's Switzerland. It's another sad presentation in terms of breeding. I mean, it's as bad as it could be in terms of there being none, which is very sad to hear about. But it's nice to see that they're very much in country and can still be seen, and numbers might actually be increasing, although we don't know exactly what the reason is for that, albeit, again, in the non-breeding season only. Now I'm going to move on to Verena Ruprecht, who works for Landesbund für Vogel- und Naturschutz, or LBV. It's a large nature conservation organization in Bavaria, southern Germany. So Verena will be talking about curlews and how they've done this year in Bavaria.
So hi from southern Germany, from Bavaria. Thank you for the introduction. I start with taking you to Bavaria, which is all in the south of Germany, close to Austria and Czech. On the map on the right, you can see the outline of Bavaria, and every red dot marks a curlew breeding pair. And in the 1980s, we had still more than 900 breeding pairs. But in the recent statewide census in 2021, only about 500 breeding pairs remained. It's not jumping to the next slide. So here we are. The LBV is active in several regions across Bavaria in curlew conservation with both professional and volunteer teams. Our professional team consists of 5 people, and we do monitoring, fencing, managing farmers, collecting data, organizing habitat improvement, and so on. And these are our 4 main areas, which I will briefly introduce to you. I'll start with the one all in the north. It's the Wiesmet in the Altmühl Valley. The region consists mainly of extensively managed meadows. You can see it on the map, and there are even some more curlews breeding in the surrounding. And this year, a major re-wetting project began there. Currently, we have around 28 breeding pairs in the Wiesmet, and this year we found 21 nests and fenced them. 16 of the nets of these hatched, but we observed an unusually high nest predation, especially by birds of prey, and several eggs seem to be unfertilized. In total, 6 young birds fledged, and our radio telemetry on the studies on the chicks showed that foxes were responsible for most of the predation, and also common buzzards and marsh harriers contributed. On the picture on the right, it's from February. You can see that we have really high water levels in winter, but our problem is that until April, May, it's often very dry. The next area we manage is quite different. It's the Old Bavarian Donaumoos. It's home to 25 breeding pairs, and the landscape is very different, as you can see in the picture. in the map. It consists of many small management units with a mix of extensively used meadows and more intensively farmed grassland and arable fields, which is quite hard to manage out there. And this year we located 20 nests, and 15 of these hatched. And we saw an unusually high number of eggs that did not hatch. In total, 5 young birds fledged, and also there we did radio telemetry on chicks, and it showed again hybridation by foxes. And on the images on the right, you can see like evidence of a around 4-week-old chick buried by a fox. And we also had some records of predation by birds of prey. So, and our third area is our meadows along the Danube River in eastern Bavaria, where we have 41 breeding pairs spread over roughly 50 kilometers in very different habitat types. And we found 23 nests, protected them with fences, and 19 of them hatched. And in total, 22 birds fledged there, which is a quite good result for us. And interesting is that 11 of these fledglings came from a single fenced area of 15 hectares, where large-scale fencing seemed to be highly effective. In the 2 previous regions I have shown you, we also use large fences, but they don't really seem to work as well as here. And sometimes we use fencing systems like shown in the picture, like a net with a fabric barrier at the bottom to prevent chicks from getting entangled in the net. And a side effect is that young chicks are less likely to walk out of the protected zone. And the last area I want to show to you is our newest project area. We started just this year there. It's the Loisach-Kochelsee Moor in the south of Bavaria. And you can see it's on the foothills of the Alps. So you can see on the camera traps the mountains in the background. And this is a moorland. It is surrounded by intensively used meadows, and there are only 7 breeding pairs. And unfortunately, we were able to just find 1 nest. And the observations of the adult birds there just suggested that the remaining nests were predated very early. And the single nest that we found did not hatch. The bird was breeding for over 15 days, and after the 15 days, a marsh harrier predated the nest, as you can see on the big picture there. So yeah, this was my fast overview of our Bavarian breeding season.
Thanks, Marina. Really interesting presentation. It's a worrying decline from 1980 to today, but it's great to hear about all the work your project's doing to work on solving these issues. I'm now going to move on to Helmut Krukenberg, biologist and head of Institute for Wetlands and Waterbird Research, who will also be talking to us from Germany. So thanks, Helmut.
I just gathered roughly the data from northwestern Germany from the other projects. It's in our bird sanctuaries by EU law. There are several bureaus and institutions doing nest protection, and I called around and asked for the breeding success in the last season. So I will give you just really a short overview about this. So here you can see the distribution of the curlews in Germany. And so okay. And here in the red square, you can see the core breeding area in the northwest, the population on which we focus mainly. In the south, you can see the Bavarian and Rheinland-Pfalz population below. The population in Lower Saxony, especially, which covers most of this northwestern population, decreased enormously over the last centuries. You can see here the distribution from 1985. And this is the actual situation from a county-wide count last year, 2024. So you can see that the population really decreased not only in numbers, it decreased in numbers. It's less than a half now than 30 years ago, but it's also shrinking in the spatial distribution in the county. So we had, as you can see here on the map, several study sites in the tracking, and I asked around in this on this sites about the breeding success in 2025, and that's a listing what you can see here from the north to the south. In the very north, the Ventiativ, they estimated 36 pairs and had a lot of fledged chicks this season, which is not common every year. It's nature reserve, but anyway. Then in the run that's in the middle at the county board of Cloppenburg, it's 46 with a slightly decrease and 0.58 juveniles per pair. In Bremen, you have a lot of Blockland and Niederfliedern, the next lines. This is Bremen, and they have a lot of curlews with increasing population, but they are really doing a lot with water level rising and nest protection and doing welfare for the farmers. And they had 65 to 70 fledged chicks this year. That's quite enormous success. A bit more to the north in Rothenburg, they had just 20 pairs, and there's a clear decrease with 0.5 juveniles per pair in this season. In the Dümmer area, which is the Lower Saxony big nature reserve around the Lake Dümmer, the estimate is 100 pairs, quite stable. And then to the south, Steinfurt and Bentheim, it's a decrease and with a really bad breeding success in this year. So it's quite different in the sites with the breeding success. According, I think, to the number of mice they had and the rainfall, of course. We had this year, it was, in contrast to last year, it was dry. And so the farmers started, in some of the areas, started quite early with mowing. On the other hand, in some of the areas, it was so dry that the grass didn't grow enough. And so the curlews had good chances that the chicks hatched and partly fledged. So from northwestern part, that's all at the moment. All these institutions and foundations regularly are forced by the administration to upload the data of 2025 next year, unfortunately. So this is quite all of this is preliminary at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Helmut. Really interesting presentation as always. I'm going to move on quickly because we are getting a little bit short of time. On now to slides sent in by Florian Billinger from Austria, which I'll be reading out. So predation, protection and conservation results from the Ibmer Moor project will be presented here. This is a model for improving breeding success through targeted protection and monitoring. Austria has up to 70 pairs of breeding curlew in country, which is quite a wide range, 20 to 70, with about 3,000 to 3,500 individuals on migration and up to 1,200 overwintering birds. But as the story goes in most places, numbers are declining of breeding and migrating birds. However, due to climate change, numbers are actually increasing in winter. The Ibmer Moor project in North Austria is a cross-border project running from this year to 2028 with the objective of increasing curlew productivity through predation mitigation. This project has been implemented by Austrian ornithological partners and wetland managers. The project involves a large study area with a core zone of predator exclusion and monitoring of nests to allow for clutch loss and hatching to be studied, along with population surveys to look at breeding success. Results have shown that hatching success is extremely high with very good protection of eggs in place, However, the fledging rate is very low and far below the sustainable threshold at only 0.15 young. So fencing is effective at protecting nests, but less so at protecting chicks, which has been found in other projects around Europe as well. But they found that protection of this matter isn't enough in its own right to allow for population recovery. The findings from the study include finding that fencing secures eggs but not chicks, as previously mentioned, and that challenges still remain. They still have problems with aerial predation, habitat structures, the weather, as always, especially with climate change, I imagine, is just getting more difficult and more extreme, and possible mortality of embryos, which again, we have heard from other projects. Next steps for next year onwards to 2028 are to enhance habitat structures and chick covers, to continue with predator and weather monitoring, and to integrate findings into the wider Central European curlew recovery strategy. They conclude that the first year shows success in protecting nests, but lasting recovery needs full landscape scale solutions. So that was a bit of a whiz through this as I just received slides and also in terms of keeping to time. So a very interesting findings from Austria, and it's nice to see the success of eggs, even though fledging success is much lower. On now to Sweden, and slides again sent in to myself by Martin Green from Lund University, and which I will again be reading out. So this is a short summary of the status of the Eurasian curlew in Sweden. So curlews in Sweden are breeding over a large part of the country, but as the story goes everywhere, unfortunately, in declining numbers. And due to this rapid decrease, they're now classified as endangered on the Swedish Red List, suggesting that they may be classified as endangered in the updated one, 2025. The last formal population estimate was last year, which suggested there are 6,700 pairs. But this shouldn't be seen as an increase from the estimate given before. It's just a new estimate based on the latest available information. It doesn't necessarily mean that things are massively changing. So there's no national atlas work that's been done since the 70s to 80s, but the breeding distribution can be seen on the left, and this is based on spontaneously reported sightings of the birds. But you can see that they're very much, as mentioned before, all around the country. They're surveyed once a year in the late breeding season, and this shows the average number of curlews observed on the routes which are surveyed every year. The darker dots show that there are more curlews encountered in those areas compared to the lighter ones, compared to the average 2014 to 2024. So you can see, again, just that they're occurring all over, but at different densities. Various counts suggest, numbers are decreasing, as seems to be the case everywhere, quite rapidly. Quite shocking, just looking at that, different types of counts indicating different rates of decline. But as we can see at the moment, 2025 numbers looking very poor, with not much signs of improvements over the last few years. And again, according to bird surveys, the same kind of story holds, unfortunately. Numbers declining, different rates, different findings saying it's happening at different speeds, but all finding the decline in the country in Sweden, unfortunately. Just a very quick summary, especially for the purposes of time as well, but really interesting stuff, and a lot of work going into finding out, which is a very big part of solving the problems, is to actually find out what's going on in the first place. So that's, really important. So thank you very much. I'll be moving on to Poland now, where we have Przemek Oboza. He is the research coordinator for the Life Project Polish Society.
Program for Curlew is started in 2013, and today the conservation work is a part of the Life Project Curlew in Danger, led by Polish Society for Bird Protection. To start, just a few general slides about curlew in Poland. And the curlew is strictly protected and needs active conservation. The breeding population is conservation in 21 Natura 2000 sites, shown in red on the map. Black dots show the current distribution of the breeding population, and in 2020 its treat status changed from vulnerable to endangered. Since 2018 we have an official action plan for this species. In the last 4 decades the curlew range has decreased by 51%. This decline is especially visible in western Poland, not too much in the eastern. After a long-term decline, the population has been increased since 2019, and the first plot on the right shows the trend. It's based on monitoring data from national scheme. The data for 2025 have not been published yet, but we already know that the index is higher than in 2024. And this population growth is the result of conservation actions, mainly head starting. The pictures show the typical breeding habitats of Curlew in Poland, which are grasslands. The top photos show the parts of the same post-peatland area in eastern Poland. On the left, you can see the land managed extensively, and on the right, the land managed more intensively, mainly by mowing. The bottom photos show river valleys. On the left, we can see extensively managed floodplain in eastern Poland, and on the right, we can see example of grasslands being converted into maize fields from grasslands. We use three approaches for active protection of clutches. The first head starting, the second nest fencings, and the third act cooperation with farmers to prevent nest destruction when nests were not fenced. Fieldwork was carried out in 14 areas, including 11 Natura 2000 sites. There were 4 head starting stations marked with yellow circles on the map. The operational links between areas and the head starting stations are shown on the map with black lines. During breeding season, we detect 147 breeding pairs and 9 unpaired territorial males. For 94 pairs, we found at least one nest. In total, we located 114 nests. 52 clutches were taken for head starting. These were mainly early first clutches at an early stage of incubation. Only a few were late or replacement clutches that would definitely have been destroyed. We fenced 31 nests, and another 31 were marked with stakes for farmers so they wouldn't not be destroyed during fieldwork. The nests were monitored using camera traps and eye-button temperature loggers. Success was clearly higher in fenced nests, as shown in the top left plot. The main cause of nest failures was predation, both in fenced and unfenced nests, which you can see in the top right plot. In unfenced nests, mammals and birds had a similar share in predation, and many predators could not be identified, and fenced nests were mainly predated by avian predators. The table shows a detailed summary of nest predators. One surprising result was the predation of 5 nests by the lesser spotted eagle, including 4 fenced nests. Unfortunately, there was also one case where a dog destroyed the eggs. It is also worth noting that single confirmed case of a fox. However, it is very likely that more fox cases are hidden in categories unknown predators and unknown mammal. Out of the 147 detected pairs, 92 pairs had no breeding outcome. Only 13 pairs had breeding success, meaning they raised at least one fledgling. We know for sure that 20 chicks fledged. The minimum fledgling productivity per breeding pair was 0.40. For pairs with no breeding success, it was 0.22. Of course, these values are too low to keep the population stable. We also released 107 head-started Curlews. If we include them in the productivity calculation, the minimum assisted productivity per pair was 0.86, which allows the population to be considered stable. And next season we plan to increase the number of fenced nests. We also working on mammal predator control, so we hope for better natural productivity in the field. At 65 Curlews population are marked with a yellow flag. as shown in the pie chart on the left. For 45 of them, we were able to read the code. Among these birds, 56 were head starts, 2 were ringed as white-reared chicks, and 7 were caught as adults. It's very likely that most of the 20 birds with unread codes are also head starts. An interesting case is a male marked on its wintering grounds by a British project, but we are not able to read the full codes on his coloring, and this male has been breeding in Poland for around 5-6 years. And thank you for your attention, and thank you, Curlew Action, for invitation.
Thanks very much, Przemek. Very interesting about the eagle, frustrating about the dog, and once again, evidence of the importance of head starting. So that was really interesting to hear. Moving on now to Hungary. This will be an update sent over by Dr. Gergo Nagy from the Ministry of Agriculture in Budapest. Unfortunately, once again, you're going to have to hear from me, but I will do my best to do this slides justice. So the breeding population, again, varies 20 to 70 pairs. I don't know whether that's due to lack of very intense monitoring or whether it's how it's varied over the years, but certainly 20 to 70 is the official figure. Migrating individuals, quite varied, but wintering population, 180 to 1,200, which is a very big disparity between the two. These are all figures from recent national surveys, so I suppose, again, this means the level might be unsure of the exact number that they have in country. As is the case in many places, the breeding and number of migrants is declining, but the wintering is increasing. And we've seen other projects suggest this might be because of climate change, but whatever the reason, they're seeing more in winter. Could also be, as I mentioned earlier, because maybe they're more productive elsewhere. But they do suggest here that it is due to the milder winters, so climate change, which may increase the number that we see in the future there. Because a lot of species are seen to be either not migrating or not migrating as far, simply because winters further north are now warmer. So they're nesting in traditional sites, which are the fen meadows with peaty soils and the marshy grasslands, but they're now also occupying newer habitats like steppe-like grasslands and arable lands. And we all know that farmland is considered a very important habitat for curlews. Certainly in the UK, it's a very important habitat for them. And finally, the key messages, which are that the Eurasian curlew is losing its breeding habitat, but is adapting to new landscapes, which is always good to hear. Climate change may be reshaping its winter distribution. As we said, the winter distribution of many species is seen to be going northwards due to milder winters. And monitoring and habitat protection are essential to reverse declines in breeding in migratory populations, which I think every project that's spoken to us today has made very evident. So it's very important that we learn as much as we can about them and monitor them to the best of our abilities. Thank you. That's Hungary. So as a short summary, there are currently very few breeding pairs in Hungary, and unfortunately there are no significant conservation actions in place at the moment, but they are being monitored, and it's important that we know what's going on before we can do anything about it anyway, but hopefully the things will improve. Finally, this evening we have Pel Milov from Estonia. Pel is from the Estonian Ornithological Society and will be talking to us about how curlews are faring in Estonia.
I'm going to present one slide about to give you an overview about Estonian curlews. So the last estimation for the population size is about 400 to 500 breeding pairs. So the last counts has been from rice bogs mainly. It's nearly 400, and coastal grasslands about 16 pairs, and other fields means the croplands and other grasslands like more inland from Estonia. And we don't have any good estimation for this, but we are sure that there are no more than 100 pairs left outside from the raised bogs and coastal grasslands. So the trends has been short-term trend from 2013 is estimated as stable, but as you can see from the numbers, the stable comes from that because the zero is just in the middle. But you can also see that it is truly slightly decreasing still. But since 1984, so the long-term trend has been decreasing for 81%. So the last changes has been shortly that it is stable or slightly increasing in the bog areas. So we can estimate that few pairs have been switched from the croplands and agricultural areas from the bogs, and there's still continuous decrease in agricultural landscapes and also in coastal grasslands. So, and the major issues are, as they are almost everywhere, so the identification of agricultural management, and there has been like a wide general grassland habitat loss, but now the latest studies has shown that also the predation on coastal grasslands can be the main issues for curlews and other waders. There are actually no special monitoring programs in Estonia for curlews, but we're gonna set up the national new project for like a strategic nature project that will be from 2027 to 38 years, and it includes also Hiiumaa Island on the left. That the plan is to take control over the small predators, so and to favor more waders and other, including curlews, of course, and also another restoration or landscape restoration part of this project going to be on the eastern Estonia, where the raised bogs and wetlands going to be restored. So it also gonna favor the habitat and population of curlews. So about the map, there is with orange, there is the raised bogs that are occupied by curlews at some point, and with green, the grasslands that are also found all over Estonia, but not in that good condition, or they're too small, mostly to be suitable for curlews. And all the yellow, those are the grasslands that or not the grasslands, but the croplands that the population is really declining and almost gone till now. We also have some protection areas that the curlew is the protected species there. Those are striped in blue, and also from last 5 years, you can see those blue dots are about breeding observations. So yes, unfortunately not exact actions till now, but it's gonna be changed, I hope. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pell. I haven't heard much about curlews in Estonia before, so it was really interesting to hear what's actually going on there, because I had no idea. So that's the end of our presentations this evening. A huge thank you to everyone who's spoken to us, and thank you to everyone who's attended, of course, in the audience. From these various presentations about curlews breeding around Europe, I think it's fair to say that curlews aren't doing too well around Europe, but there are strongholds, and it's incredible the amount of work that's being done to bring them back. So I personally express my gratitude to everyone who's part of the solution. With that, thanks again for coming, and hopefully see you at Curlew Action webinar sometime soon. Thanks very much.